know, that the inadequacy here is, in fact, where the grace of God comes through. I'm trying to think who this was. It might have been Tagore or one of those Indian poets who says that the cracks are where the light enters.
Leonard Cohen.
Is that Leonard Cohen?
Yeah, he did a song. I don't know where he got it.
Okay.
He was Buddhist, so.
Oh yeah, he may have gotten it from some, you know, yeah. I think Leonard Cohen is really one of the great singer-songwriters of our day. And of course, after he died, Alleluia became a really big song again. And it's just, it's a really glorious, but really mournful song. But that's it. Yeah, so Leonard Cohen, cracks are where the light gets in. And I think that ultimately is the lesson of Paul. You know, those cracks, which are real, are also where the light gets in. What else?
Well,
Yeah.
I'd also add that in Paul's time, they saw the physical weaknesses and maladies as a manifestation of sin.
Yeah.
So sort of conflating the sin and the physical together, you know, that all the people Jesus healed, people are like, well, what sin did they commit that he's blind, that he's deaf?
Though remember, Jesus actually rejected that.
He did, but it's still culturally would have been appropriate to sort of see a correlation between the physical and the
physical and moral states. Though Paul ultimately rejects that as well, because really the point that he's making here is all of his suffering likens him to Jesus. Okay? So that his critics, and one of the things we think these opponents were the positions they were taking, and this is sort of the problem with the Pauline literature, he never identifies his opponents by name, number one, and never really tells us what they think. So we have to kind of draw our conclusions from his reaction, okay? And that's kind of an historical problem. But one of the critiques they seem to have made went something like this. If God really wanted Paul to succeed, wouldn't he make things a little easier on him? Okay? Maybe God's trying to tell him something. And Paul will end up saying, look, all this sufferings that I'm enduring, the beatings and the, you know, bastinado and the rest of it, are ways in which I come to resemble Jesus. So, there's that. Okay, yeah.
Do we think that he was being accurate in this, I've been beaten 5 times and, you know, had my feet break? I mean, or is it...
You think it's hyperbolic?
Yeah.
Well, you know, even if it happened just once,
right.
it'd be bad.
Right.
But, you know, I don't have any reason to doubt this because the scarring and the crippling would have been noticeable.
Okay.
I mean, if he had been, even if he had had the bastinado once, he would have limped for the rest of his life. And it would have hurt for the rest of his life. I don't know if you've ever broken anything. I broke one time my little finger. Not real serious, okay? I slipped. I got my first book contract. I was meeting a friend to celebrate the book contract. It was a dark and stormy night. I was living in a rectory in Dallas, Texas. I walked out onto the parking lot. I was heading to my car, and I slipped and I fell, and my hand went through the grill of a Volvo. Oh. And a friend of mine said, imagine if it had been a Ford. It would have been a whole lot worse. So the finger got broken. There's even a funnier story that's all part of that, of a homeless person who kind of picked me up and put me back together again, and I'll tell that story maybe another time. But I didn't know I'd broken the little finger until like 10 days later, and I was driving to work, and I would tap this is what guys do in their car by themselves, I would tap the steering wheel to keep time with the music. I probably shouldn't tell the women that. That's not a guy's secret, okay? You got to do one side into single guys in the car. You do it?
I don't think so.
I'm just not aware enough yet. So I called my doc, who was my classmate from college, and I said, Bob, you know, every time I tap my finger on the window, you know, to keep time with the music, I said, it really hurts. And he said, stop doing that. Then he called me into his office, and then we did a little x-ray, and he said, yeah, you know, your finger's broken, but it's really beginning to set now. So he said, I can break it again for you. like he really wanted to, I think. And I said, no, I think I'll just let it. So it's a little crooked, but here's the deal. It still hurts. It hurts in bad weather. Like today when it snowed, you know how I knew it was snowing? My fingers started to hurt, okay? where the light comes in, though, right? Okay? The thorn in the flesh, all of that, right? No, but I mean, my point to that would be that for Paul, the physical is not a punishment for sin, but it can be the weakness, and it can be a place where grace manifests itself. Brother Garrett.
So is the grace manifesting itself to Paul through that weakness? Because it's certainly not a grace for the people who are mocked. So if the glory of God or the goodness of God or the grace of God is manifested in human weakness, for whom is this given? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in a culture where people are being mocked all the time and bullied or whatever, where's this grace?
Well, maybe it's for us,
For
that
the
we
person
learn the
who's-
lesson of this. You know, maybe it's for posterity. Not, but I think you're right. I think those people who are mocked were shamed. You know. Now, here's the good news about all that. I think they were shamed, but they're never identified by name. Paul's good about that. Though it's maddening for me as an historian. I'd like to know who these people were. You know. But since he never names them, it's in some respects a way of sparing them shame. Okay? So maybe there's some charity in there. My rugby guy.
Did the people that he was mocking, did they know who they were from the letters, or?
You know, I mean, we don't know, because we never have their point of view. And that would be lovely to know. Would they have recognized themselves in the letter? I don't know. I'm thinking about, you know, we're seeing a lot of mockery in political discourse these days. Do the ones who are being mocked recognize themselves?
Yes.
Well, we know one guy does, because he tweets about it. Right? You know? But, you know, those are really interesting questions that I'm afraid I just can't answer because the evidence doesn't permit me to do so. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, I was just wondering about a minor point about Pharisees, Sadducees, etc. Is that, like, how did you get to be one? Did you self-identify, or did you have to pass some witness test? Did you have to be invited in? Did you have to,
You went to school.
Went to school, okay, and then you became one. And,
Yeah.
and I was thinking, in modern times, it's about being Catholic, you know. How do you, there are people, who says you're Catholic and who says you're not? And you know, I know about baptism and so on and so forth, but I recall back in the 60s when Humana Vitae came out, and the more quote conservative people were saying if you
Made that the
didn't-
litmus test.
yeah, if you didn't buy that, you were not Catholic. And I remember seeing an article that said, forget how many, the large majority of Catholics in this country said they basically believed in artificial birth control. And
But we're not leaving the church.
And they said, and I remember this article very well. The conservatives saying you're not Catholic, and the people, the person writing the article said the people are saying the hell we're not.
Yeah.
Saying,
Right.
and so it's the same sort of
I think that was an American magazine, wasn't
Might have
it?
been.
I think it was.
Might
Yeah, I
have
think I
been.
remember that same
Yeah.
essay.
But anyway, that whole thing about belongingness and who says who you are and who you aren't.
Yeah, right. You know, for Paul, the only thing that distinguished us from them was baptism. It was it. Other than that, he was prepared to welcome everybody.
Not a bad litmus test.
No, I mean, and I don't even call it a litmus test. I mean, you know, for him, it is. It's a ritual, it's an action, not just a ritual as in a sort of a thing, but it's an action in which one engages that brings one into a relationship with, obviously, with God and with the people of God. And so we don't think of it so much as a limitation, but even an invitation is probably the better way of thinking of the way in which he would understand baptism. And of course, he has this very radically inclusive understanding of baptism that it's a place where those who are baptized recognize no distinction between Jew, Greek, slave free, male, female, which is very radical. I mean, I think it's a lesson that the church continues to absorb.
You're born into
Yeah. Well, you're born into a family in which differences don't make any difference. So I think again we need to draw this to a close here because people are leaving. And I'm talking to an empty room, so I think I'm going to conclude while you're still here to hear me conclude. But I think my point would be, yes, he is very human. And No, it doesn't matter. In fact, it does. It matters precisely because these all too human limitations are the places where grace transforms him and us. Okay? All right, so next week, Paul and slavery.
Next week we're off.
Yeah, next week we're right. It's the 22nd. Yeah, because I'm going to be in Orlando, Florida, because someone's got to do that hardship tour. Well, it's going to be a really boring meeting, though, so there's penance. Anyhow, we're not here next week. We will be here on the 22nd, Paul and slavery. And remember, you were going to tell me what you want to talk about on that last week. So better come up with something. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here looking at one another saying, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? All right.
Something
See y'all.
really long or, yeah,